What's up? It's Prime Scalador here with another Raid Shadow Legends video today here on the main account, and we are going to be talking about none other than Demon Lord Clan Boss. Now, the Demon Lord Clan Boss is one of those things that you end up getting access to relatively early on in the game, but is something that you will use continually. Reason being why is because of the rewards you can get from these high-end chests via Nightmare and Ultra Nightmare. Things like Sacred Shards, Legendary Skill Tomes, Void Shards, and it can be a very consistent way to get those sort of rewards, especially if you are on the free-to-play or low spender side of things. Now, the most prominent way to go through and beat these is through some sort of undying team, such as an unkillable team, or a block damage team, or an infinite shield team. I myself run an infinite shield team via Vaultkeeper Wixwell. But the question comes down to, how are you supposed to make a team if you don't have access to it? Because a lot of times these sort of teams are reliant on having specific sorts of champions and having the specific speed tunes for it. So in the cases that you are trying to go through and build a team that would be known as a killable team, or something that does not rely on those methods, you would need to implement a few couple of things, and that is what we're going to focus on today. To start, we are going to focus on none other than a specific buff, and that is Ally Protect. Now, the Ally Protect buff comes in two forms. There's the weak 25% and the stronger 50%. What that does is when a champion places it on their allies, they will take either 50% or 25% of the damage that those allies would take, and they would take it instead. So it allows you to build one champion extremely tanky and have them mitigate a lot of the damage. Now, there are quite a few champions who have this, but today we're going to focus on a couple that are easier to get. And by that we mean a couple of epic champions. We're going to start out with my absolute favorite, and the one I used for the longest time, and that is none other than good old Toragi the Frog. Now, Toragi the Frog, his books down to a 3-turn cooldown, puts a shield on him, and then the ally protection out, and then also heals him for 25% of his max HP and puts a reflect damage. Now, this is great because with him taking a ton of the damage that your allies would be taking, you want him tanky and you want him to be able to be healed. So every time he throws that out, he is going to be able to heal himself back up. He's also great because of this amazing passive, this Toxic Blood. When he's attacked, has a 50% chance of putting a 5% poison on the attacker for 2 turns. This is great because the clan boss itself, the Demon Lord, has 2 AoE attacks and then a single target attack. And so 2 of the 3 times it takes a turn, Toragi is going to be hit. And every single time he gets hit, that is a 50% chance of throwing a poison up on the clan boss, which is a good source of damage. Next, we're going to look at another one who is probably my number 2 on my favorites. We're going to hop over to the Ogryn tribe, and we are going to look at good old Skull Crusher. Okay? Skull Crusher is great because of this A2. Puts Ally Protect on all allies. It's on a 3-turn cooldown for 2 turns, similar to Toragi. And then puts counterattack on everyone except this champion and an unkillable on him for 1 turn. The reason why this is nice is it means that that first time up, he is going to be alive no matter what, thanks to that unkillable. And then those counterattacks are going to help with your allies dealing more damage. Now, something I forgot to mention earlier is that when we look at these ally protections, we want something that is going to be on a 2-turn for preferably a 3-turn cooldown. Reason why is because we can then bring in a buff extender and have it up the entire time. There are a lot of champions who have it for 2 turns on a 4-turn cooldown or 1 turn on a 3 or 4-turn cooldown. And while that will mitigate the damage for a little bit, it's not as effective and makes building the teams a lot harder. Next one we're going to look at is over in the High Elves, and that there is Vergis, right here. His puts a continuous heal and an increased speed buff and a reflect damage on a target ally for 3 turns. So this can be a little bit tricky if you're running a speed tune team, because you have one person on your team who's going to get increased speed. But with that continuous heal, it can be helpful if you have someone who's getting low on health. And then he puts an ally protection on all allies except for him for 2 turns. It's on a 3-turn cooldown. And then puts increased defense on him for 2 turns. And so it's going to mean that when he takes that excess damage, that increased defense is going to mitigate some of that damage that he would take. He also has this amazing passive where it puts a shield on him equal to 10% of his max HP for 2 turns whenever he loses 10% or more HP from a single hit. And then on a 3-turn books to a 1-turn cooldown, places continuous heal on this champion for 2 turns every time their HP drops below 50%. So this is great for a ally protector because of the fact that he is going to help himself stay alive. Taking all that excess damage is going to result in his health dropping low pretty fast. So any built-in factors that can help keep them alive is phenomenal. For example, Taragi has his heal on it, Skullcrusher has his unkillable, and Vergis has that heal that will pop up with that shield. Next option we're going to look at is none other than Nazana. So we're going to hop down here to the Demon Spawn, Nazana. She's got her ally protect on all allies for 2 turns, puts a shield on her for 2 turns equal to 40% of her max HP. So that there is like giving a temporary 40% heal in a sense of when the clan boss deals damage to her, it's going to eat at that shield first. And so it's a really solid skill right there. And with that buff extender, you can make sure that that shield and that ally protection is up the entire time. She also has an A3 that has a 50 books up to 75% chance of putting decreased attack for 2 turns. This is really great because later on we're going to talk about decreased attack and how this is so useful. So she right there brings it in. Same with Taragi. Taragi also has that decreased attack that is very useful. Then we're going to hop down to the Dwarves, looking for Rearguard Sergeant. Rearguard Sergeant has the decreased defense and also has that decreased attack with a heal based on the damage she inflicts. But here has this ally protect and a continuous heal buff on all allies except this champion for 2 turns. So with her, she's going to protect and heal your team. Her kit's not really good about keeping her alive, but she will help keep the rest of your team alive. So if you have a way of building her, whether it's in a regen set or lifesteal, I would probably recommend more of a regen, or have a single target healer who can heal her. This can be a very solid way to keep your allies healed. And then the last one we're going to look at for these epics is going to be down here to Kunoichi, I think is how you pronounce it, Kunoichi. A1 has a weaken, A2 puts a leech up, which will heal everyone when they deal damage. And then her A3 puts an ally protection on all allies except this champion for 2 turns on a 3-turn cooldown, and then fills his champion's turn meter by 50%. Once again, this will be really hard to work with if you're trying to do a speed-tuned version of it, but nonetheless, this will allow her to get back to this skill really fast. And she's got her passive where she gets block damage for 1 turn whenever her HP drops below 50%. Very helpful in keeping her alive. It's on a 5-turn cooldown, but with that A3 boosting her turn meter, you can manage to keep her alive pretty well. Now, heaven forbid you have terrible luck when it comes to pulling ally protectors. Okay? It is understandable. The rates in this game are rather terrible, and the chances of getting specific champions can be rather frustrating. So, in that case, for that, there are a couple of honorary mentions for the early stuff. We are going to look down in here for Daywalker. Daywalker has a 25% ally protection on 2 turns for a 3-turn cooldown. Okay? It is a 25%, not 50%. And so it's not as effective, but it also removes all debuffs from this champion and puts a block buffs on him for 2 turns. He also has this nifty passive where it revives him with 30% HP, and then he attacks everyone after being killed. It's on a 5-turn cooldown. So, I mean, it's one of those that worst case scenario he is an option. You also have, in the dwarves, you've got Grumbler. If we can find where he went. There he is. He's got this A3 with a 25% ally protection on allies for 2 turns on a 3-turn cooldown, and then an increased defense on this champion for 2 turns. Once again, could be a temporary solution for the early games. And then the last one we will look at with this 25% is going to be in the Oghren. It is Mykolas. Okay? He's got a shield on him for 2 turns equal to 20% of his max HP, and then the 25% ally protection for 2 turns on a 3-turn cooldown, and then heals all allies equal to 10 books up to 25% of their max HP. His A1 also heals this champion and the ally with the lowest HP, and then he decreases the damage all allies receive and receives it instead. So those are options for early game if you can't find something that would work. Now, in the absolute worst case, let's say you aren't able to make it work and find something like that with a champion who has those sort of buffs, all hope is not lost. Here in the daily rewards, if you make it to 270 days, you get Visix the Unbowed, who is a phenomenal champion. And her A2 puts an ally protection on all allies for 2 turns on a 3-turn cooldown. Now, her kit is not built for Demon Lord. This is literally the only skill that she has that does anything to the Demon Lord clan boss. But as an absolute necessity, you could use her as an option. And then later on, I don't remember specifically how long it is into it. It might be a year and a half, you get Eric's. And Eric's has a ally protection on all allies for 2 turns on a 3-turn with a counterattack. And then a awesome ability to go through and do some wave stuff. But nonetheless, with Demon Lord, it wouldn't be as effective, but still having that counterattack could be helpful. So don't worry, never fear. In the end, one way or another, if you play long enough, you are guaranteed to get a good ally protector. Now, if you're just starting the game, there is a code for new players to use to start with Taragi the Frog. And right there, that gets you out the gate set to get pretty far in Clan Boss. So now that we have looked at that buff, we are going to look at what is arguably the second most important, and that is that decrease attack. Now, we have mentioned a couple of the ally protectors who bring it in with their kit. And so if you can get, a Taragi the Frog who has that built in their kit already, you're taking care of 2 different things with a single champion, which gives you more space to diversify your team with other things. But in the case that you are unable to, well, we've got a couple of different options. And we've got ourselves here in the dwarves down, and I believe here we've got ourselves a runic warrior. It's a 50% chance twice, so it is technically a 75% chance of putting the decrease attack for 2 turns on a 3-turn cooldown. A really good chance, especially for rare, especially because that is the bigger version of decrease attack. And then he gives the team also reflect damage and continuous heal, so helping them stay alive. So he could be an option if you need it. Another one would be Coffin Smasher. That is here. Coffin Smasher has it on his A1. It's a 3-time hit, each with a 30% chance of putting the attack. So it's not as reliable, but it could be helpful if you're needing maybe a secondary person who does it, who would be able to help. He also has a HP burn for 2 turns, and that goes up to a 75% chance, so that can be very helpful, and then decreasing AoE attacks by 5%. From there, you could always hop over to one of my favorites of all the Void rares, and that is none other than Dagger. In my video talking about the best rares from each faction, when it comes to the Banner Lords, Dagger has that decreased defense and that decreased attack. It is only a 75% chance, but I used her for the longest time, and it can be helpful with her being Void because she will not weak hit, so nonetheless, it could be better than nothing no matter what. Then we will hop down to the Lizardmen and go looking for Bogwalker. Right here. His A1 has a 30, books up to a 50% chance putting the decrease attack for 2 turns. Once again, not as reliable, but still can be helpful. And then puts a small increased defense on all allies, and then puts the reflect damage on all allies when attacked with a critical hit. So, better than nothing, not highly recommended, but can work. Now, once you hit day 240, you get access to Grush the Mangler. Now, Grush is great, especially when it comes to Clan Boss, if I can find where he is, because he has it on a 100% chance of putting that decrease attack there on a 4-turn cooldown for 2 turns. He also brings continuous heals on your team, and also a leech. So honestly, if you make it that far and you're able to get him, I would recommend throwing him on. He does a lot of damage, a lot of healing, and is very good at keeping your team alive. Plus, any other decrease attack champion that you find might be better, especially with the legendaries. We don't focus on the legendaries here simply because for each account it's different. Some accounts may never see certain legendaries in their lives. And so it's really hard to build a team and say, oh yeah, go for this specific legendary when, you know, there's no guarantee that you will ever get it. Now, with this, we're going to go into our buff extenders, because with our people who are able to put out our ally protection buffs or any sort of buff that's going to keep us alive, having it there for the full duration of the ability is nice, and it does help a lot. And thankfully, buff extenders are relatively easy to get. If we hop down to Demon Spawn, we have none other than Hellborn Sprite. She's got Weaken on the A1, which can be useful, but here increases the duration of all ally buffs by 1 turn. It's on a 3-turn cooldown, so you throw her alongside any ally protector who has on a 2-turn for 3 2 turns on a 3-turn duration, she allows it to be there for 3 of the 3 times. Another option, and a really solid one as is Valerie. Now, Valerie has it, on this one, increases the duration of all buffs on all allies for 1 turn on a 3-turn cooldown, and decreases the duration of all debuffs on all allies for 1 turn. This can be very helpful if you're dealing with things like the decreased speed from the Spirit Affinity clan boss, as she decreases it by 1 turn. And then she puts a small increase attack, which if you don't have increase attack, could be helpful. The best part about her is she is campaign farmable. If you go into the campaign and you go into Kaerok Castle, there's a chance that you can pick her up just by running the stages. So if you're in desperate need of a buff extender, just run Kaerok's Castle a couple of times and you can pick one up and be able to use her. Another great option is in Sacred Order, where is she? Godseeker Neri, because her A2 attacks all enemies, heals all allies by 15, books up to 35% of their max HP, then decreases the duration of all buffs on all enemies by 1 turn, and increases the duration of all buffs by 1 turn. On a 3-turn cooldown, it's phenomenal. She also has a revive and a built-in increase to healing and revive on death. I've used her in a lot of teams where I need a buff extender just because she covers so much. Another great option is, I believe he's here, yep, Anchorite. Removes a random debuff from all allies, so mini cleanse, and then increases the duration of all ally buffs by 1 turn on a 3-turn cooldown. Also fully heals a target, and heals the lowest HP ally. So a phenomenal one there. There are a couple of other honorary mentions. We can look in the orcs. You have Sandslash Survivor, who has the ability to increase those durations. And then in, I believe, not the Banner Lords, Sacred Order, again, you have Hope. Where is she? Which comes along with the shield. Now, down the line, your goal is to, via the fusions, unlock Lady Mikage, because Lady Mikage has it on her A2. And now she does everything. She increases your buffs, decreases your debuffs, decreases the buffs on the enemies, increases the debuffs on them as well, does a lot of different stuff. But those buff extenders can be very helpful in keeping those protective buffs all the way up. From there are a handful of other very helpful buffs that can be very useful. Block debuffs is phenomenal because it prevents your teams being thrown out of order via the decreased speed debuff from the Spirit Affinity clan boss. It can help make sure that your teammates aren't getting stunned by that A1 that the clan boss does. So very helpful one. And a lot of the higher up champions like legendaries and even some, I believe, epics have it for 2 turns on a 3-turn cooldown. So if you put that with that buff extender, it is now up 3 out of 3 turns. Increase attack is great for increasing the damage of any attack champions. Increase defense. The 60% increased defense can be a lifesaver for your team. When you start hitting Nightmare clan boss, you want at least 3,000 to 4,000 defense on each of your champions. And for early and mid game, it can be hard to build champions with a lot of defense. And so having that increased defense can lower down the amount of defense you need to start with, Or if you're able to meet those odds and those numbers specifically, it can up your defense a lot. Another helpful one is increased speed. The more times you go, the more times your team can do damage, the more times you can heal, and so having that increased speed is phenomenal. Another great one is shield. Having a champion that can put a hefty shield on your team prevents your champions from dying. That's what my Wixwell team does, is it has a shield that grows exponentially so much that the clan boss is just unable to break it. Now on a killable team, you're not going to have a shield to that caliber, but even getting a shield of like 20,000 HP that's being put up for 2 turns or 3 turns can help mitigate the amount of damage your team takes and allow you to live on farther. Reflect damage can reflect some damage as well. Veils can also be good because it can reduce the damage that your team takes. Rector Drath is a perfect example of someone who can throw it on the entire team and have it up for almost the entire time. Rector Drath, of course, for those who don't know, I'll pull her up. Let's see. Yeah, it'll be faster this way. Nice Revenant. Rector Drath, phenomenal at healing and puts that perfect veil for 4 turns, or on a 4-turn cooldown, puts it up for 2 turns. So with that Ally Protect, she's able to go through and, or with the buff extension, she's able to keep it up longer. Another great champion to help you is Doom Priest. Doom Priest has her passive that heals and removes a random buff, or debuff from your team at the start of her turn. So if you have her go right after that clan boss goes, she can remove any of the debuffs that he throws on immediately. Any champion that is really good at healing is phenomenal. A couple of examples of this, there's a rare here in Apothecary. Has a phenomenal heal. That is a 50% heal that can crit. I've watched champions go from almost no health to full health just from a single heal, and it's on a 2-turn cooldown. He also brings that increased speed. You also have champions like, I'm trying to remember his faction, I believe it's, Claude. Puts a shield, increase accuracy, and increase speed on everyone, and then heals the ally with the lowest HP by 10%. The start of their turn. So when building your clan boss team, you can keep those sort of things in mind, thinking about what champions you can use to mitigate damage. Another phenomenal buff for mitigating that damage is Strengthen. Perfect example being Ursula the Mourner. She brings a Strengthen, reduces the damage that your allies take by 25%. There are a couple of champions who throw it out. If you need a simple, easier one to get, you have Denid the Tusk Knight. Puts it on his team for 2 turns on a 3-turn cooldown. With that buff extender, it's up the entire time. And so you are able to use these champions to try to keep your team alive. From there, once your team's able to stay alive, you can look into options for damage. When it comes to damage, your most effective way to do it is going to be via, not a good example, where's a, so here via the Giant Slayer or the War Master procs. It's going to do some serious damage. Enemy max HP skills, burns, poisons. Phenomenal example of a damage dealer, and one who I use even to this day on my current team is Geomancer. If you can get your hands on a Geomancer, he has got that weaken and burn on 100% chance for 3 turns on a 3-turn cooldown. And then his passive, where he reflects some of that damage he takes back at the person who dealt it. He's able to pump out a ton of damage. Poisoners are another good example. Taragi was one we mentioned. In the Dark Elves, even the good old starter champ, Kale. Kale puts 4 poisons out on his A3 and 1 on his A1. If you go up to the Doom Tower on your second time beating through and gaining the champions, you can get Dark Kale, who is phenomenal with the poison sensitivity, activating poisons, and a decreased attack. So he's a phenomenal one. If you're wanting simpler ones, in the Undead Horde, you've got Frozen Banshee, who's got a poison sensitivity and then poisons on her A1. So with those poisons, you're able to just pump out a lot of damage. You don't have to worry about building a champion up with a ton and a half of crit damage and trying to build it out that way. You can use these simple champions to run, about those 50 turns for the boss and just keep going long enough to deal that damage that way. Once again, guys, appreciate you joining on the video. If you found it helpful or you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. Share it to anyone who's trying to learn how to do Clan Boss. If anyone's looking for more information on it, there are plenty of options. I'm happy to do more videos on it. Let me know in the comments if this is the sort of thing you're enjoying. Right now we're trying to get to 50 subscribers, so welcome to the crew. We enjoy having you here. As always, keep on raiding.